Quarantine, a Dvar Torah for Parashat Tazria-Metzora. A year into a pandemic, after dealing with guidelines, regulations, lockdowns, and quarantine, when the effectiveness of quarantine has been discussed in various forums in Israel and around the world, and ignited arguments, objections, and even riots, it seems that the obvious question should be, what is quarantine actually supposed to achieve? Okay, so you don't really expect me to discuss quarantine during COVID, now do you? What we are going to examine is the purpose of quarantine for the leper, Metzora. Let's start from the beginning. One of the special things about the leper is the fact that he must completely distance himself from society. Even when compared to all other Tme'im, whom indeed several of which are sent out of the Israeli camp, the leper is the only one who must keep alone completely, indeed is the only one to be placed under quarantine, hence the need to clarify the quarantine specifically with the leper. Rashi's Drash commentary is well known. He with his slander has separated between man and his wife, between man and his friend, therefore he too shall be separated. According to Rashi, being quarantined is a form of punishment, doing unto him as he has done unto others. But it is important to note that Rashi says this only regarding the definite leper, Metzora Muchlat, that is one who has already been checked, quarantined, and been found tameh. And I would like to examine the reason for sending the leper who has not yet been examined, Metzora Musgar, into quarantine. Ibn Ezra explains that the purpose is to allow a correct diagnosis. And the man shall be kept in quarantine and wait for 7 days, since most illness changes within 7 days. What I find interesting about Ibn Ezra's explanation is that although we're discussing a spiritual disease, as he himself says in a different verse, he expects it to behave like natural diseases that can only be correctly diagnosed after a week. Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor agrees with Ibn Ezra's principle that the issue is one of identification. What separates the two commentaries is what needs to be identified. He shall not see until 7 days, for only then shall the expansion be understood. For he who frequently sees something grow little by little does not recognize the growth as one who sees it from time to time. The priest can immediately make the original diagnosis, but the laws of leprosy include many sub-laws discussing the size of the lesion. Were the priest to come every day, there is a reasonable chance that he will not be able to identify whether or not it has expanded. This is somewhat similar, lehavdil of course, to a growing child. His parents who see him every day don't notice his growth process. But Auntie Shoshana, OMG! You've grown so much! And that's what he has to say about the Metzora Musgar. But when it comes to the Metzora Muchlat, he adds, this illness spreads to the people who surround him, and for that he shall be placed in quarantine, so that none will be with him. Bechor Shor's second interpretation can be explained in two ways. Either there's a fear that leprosy is contagious, and we don't want it to see it spread to other people, or we don't want to see the consequences of leprosy, be they impurity or more bad behavior, spread to the leper's friends. Rabbi Shmuel David Lutzato explains that from the initial quarantine, he will not touch another until it becomes clear whether he is pure or unclean. Shadal's explanation is very similar to the second way in which we explain the words of Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor. But he adds that the fear of harming others is evident even at the stage of uncertainty, just like during the current pandemic, people were put into quarantine for only being exposed. And let us end with the words of Rabbi Ovadia Sforno, whose commentary, while being said about the involvement of the priest with the Metzora, may also be linked to the quarantine. The decree that all decisions regarding tzarat and its defilement and purity shall be according to the Kohen, ki siftei Kohen yishmeru da'at, and he will command the perpetrator to scrutinize his deeds, and he shall pray for himself, and the priest shall pray for him. The reason the priest is involved with the Metzora is that the Metzora needs spiritual guidance. He needs to pray for himself, and I think that might also be the reason for quarantine. As the whole world goes on with their lives around the leper, it is not easy to ponder about the state of one's soul. He was therefore sent to forced solitude for 7 days, and if that didn't help, for another 7 days, to allow him to think properly. In summary, according to Rashi, lockdown is punishment. To Ibn Ezra, it's to diagnose. Bechor Shor wants to avoid contamination. Sforno wants us to have time for reflection. And me, it's just a chance to learn something. Did you enjoy this video? If so, subscribe to my channel and send it to a friend. I'm Dovi Holtz, one who loves Tanakh.